Once again, this is Nuance, and I am Mike Scala, joined as always by Jay Carter, also known as Timid. He's the hip hop MC and the chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Not much, just enjoying the day, even though it's a cold one. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. It was snowing actually here earlier, but it doesn't seem to be sticking, so that's good. You're wearing that red shirt, which kind of gives me more summery, springy vibes, not the winter.
Well, I'm inside, so, And when I did go out today, I did have a hoodie on that was pretty thick, so, yeah.
Okay, hey, I'm all for it. I can't wait for it to be warmer out here. I don't like the cold weather and the snow. But
for sure.
We are joined by a very special guest this week. We have Kami-Leigh Agard from the Rockaway Beach Autistic Families. What's going on, Kami?
Just another day, just doing the do.
There you go. And also, as we know, contributor to the Rockaway Times, right? So a respected local journalist here.
Of course. Community journalism is very important. It might be small, but it actually makes an impact. You just tell like the local people what's going on, as opposed to just seeing what's in the big tabloid broadsheet news. So information is information. So
we've spoken on here about what's happening locally really mattering in many cases more than what happens nationally. And sometimes we focus maybe too much on the national news because it's what we see when we turn on the TV and when we're bombarded with all that media from these major corporations. But if you really want to be in tune with what's going on locally and around you, you really have to take a look at your local media, look at your local elected officials and think
precisely. And not to interrupt you, but I just feel like, everyone's more about being online, but there's nothing like holding something in your hand and flipping through. It might be 40 pages, might not be a big broadsheet like the New York Times. I remember back in the day, the New York Times used to be like an encyclopedia, especially on a Sunday. But there's nothing like just flipping through a few pages, seeing somebody seeing something that actually is very important to you and having an opinion about it. And then it may motivate you to write a letter or go to the local community board. You know what I mean? So community journalism is very important. Some people argue it might be a dying entity, but you might be surprised. My grandmother loves it. So she's 86, but at the same time, it's important.
Yes. And I'll say in the Rockaways in particular, you do get more engagement than what I've seen in other areas. Because Rockaway is a very unique place, as you know, and it does feel cut off in many ways. I mean, not to go off on a tangent, but this Thursday we're doing a rally for the Queen's Link, and part of what we're talking about is transportation is so inadequate in the Rockaways in the South Queens, and this is going to be
paramount.
But that has repercussions that are just that are beyond just transportation, because now what you see is the area. Because it's geographically isolated and because transportation is so poor to the rest of the city, it really feels cut off, not just physically, but also politically and socioeconomically. And that's why these local events and local papers and things happening locally mean so much more to the residents there, because they're really like in their own world in a sense. It's almost like being on a small island, even though it's a peninsula. It has that small island type feel where everyone is really engaged in what's happening locally. And there are very important issues that are very, hyper local that you don't necessarily see in other parts of Queens or New York City.
Precisely. And I think the important part is the discussion, because people here, as you know, they tend to play tennis. My opinion, your opinion, we keep going back and forth. But at the same time, it actually fuels ideas and changes. You know what I mean? So even though we might not be on the same side, at the end of the day, we'll come to a consensus of what could work. Again, nobody's going to sing Kumbaya. But at the same time, it's just getting all the, opinions and ideas out there. And hopefully this is the goal really achieved. But the goal is to achieve something that would benefit all parts of the community. So totally get that. And the Queen's Link is a huge thing.
Oh, absolutely. And as you mentioned, things are moving more online now. The benefit to that is that it kind of puts power back in our hands in a sense, because now we can determine what we're looking at It's not like turning on the TV and just having to see whatever they're presenting to us. Now we have options. And I saw this in the music industry where it used to be all about the major labels. Unless you kind of really hip to what was going on the independent scene and proactively followed it, you're only going to get major label music and whatever they want you to see and hear. Now, because of the internet, it's more independent. I mean, even the big artists are going independent because it's really more about the people seeking out what they want to seek out, and you can look at what you're into, and you can, this is, it opens up a whole new world that you couldn't before. So I think you can draw an analogy to media and journalism as well, and that, you know, you don't have to rely on major national media sources. You can just go online and look up the Rockaway Times or local papers and what's happening locally, and having that power really enables you to engage with the world the way you want to.
Right, but unfortunately,
there are drawbacks as well.
There are drawbacks because, for example, it's a generational thing. You know what I mean? Like what I can look up online, 86-year-old grandmother is afraid to even use her phone, but she's got loads of opinions, loads of experience, loads of history, just living in a community like this. I mean, even being from England, you know what I mean? A Trinidadian in England, can you imagine? But she imparts to me her knowledge. But unfortunately, when I'm trying to tell her something, I have to tell her with what I'm reading online and say, okay, Granny, you just have to scroll down here. But you know what I mean? So I feel like it's a partnership of the younger generation and the older generation. And of course, we're all, you know, technology savvy, at least in our own little ways. But at the same time, you can't negate what the older generation imparts to us. So it is a weird relationship because up to now, bought her cell phone, refuses to use it, but she can tell me something that happened 30 years ago that actually gives context about what happens today.
Right.
So it's definitely something that's archived, but it's a relationship.
And that brings with it a whole different set of issues as well. So I mean, it's definitely an interesting thing. It's a whole new world. But speaking of online, we'd like to start off with something on the lighter side. And I found this story online. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but it's an interesting hypothetical. And for me as an attorney, I found it especially fascinating. It was about somebody who went to a house party, went to his friend's house, and there was a slot machine in the living room. Apparently this was an antique slot machine that his grandmother had, and he just kept it in his living room from the 1940s, but it still worked. And every so often people would come by and put some quarters in the machine. And usually they would lose, right, as you do on a slot machine. Every once in a while, they would win a few quarters back, maybe $10 if they get really lucky. But over the years, it kind of just accumulated quarters and people coming in and playing, finding it fascinating, and, you know, throwing some quarters down. Well, eventually, someone hit the jackpot on this slot machine in this guy's house, and they won about $700 worth of quarters that were in the machine. And the person whose slot machine it was said that they were not entitled to the quarters, that was their money. This wasn't meant to be a serious gambling operation, and he couldn't afford to give someone $700. The person who played the machine said, hey, listen, I've been putting quarters in here. You were keeping our quarters when we were losing. There was an expectation that if we won, we'd get to keep the money. That's what we thought we were doing here. So there was a debate about that. And, you know, it was posed online. People were debating both sides of it. I found it to be an interesting one. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think the guy should be entitled to the money?
Yeah, I do. I think he's entitled to the money. I think the point was well made that the person whose slot machine it was going to keep that money if they lost. And I think their excuse saying, hey, you know, because I read some of the article and he was kind of saying like, hey, we need this money, whatever. But if it's been sitting in the machine all this time, it wasn't
collecting. It's collecting. It's not like you have to go to the bank and take out $100 and be this person.
Exactly. He didn't demand to
collecting.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Check.
Yeah, he wasn't using the money. He wasn't storing it. Wasn't saving it. And it's, you know, it wasn't even clear if he even knew how much was in there.
Right.
I think it was just more, wow, this just hit this jackpot and there's this money that came out, you know. I think it was sour grapes, really.
I think so. He also said that, hey, listen, I would have given people their quarters back if they asked for it. But he didn't say that beforehand. The rules weren't mentioned beforehand. He's just saying that now.
Right. Yeah. And we see this, right, when sums of money, especially larger sums of money come into play. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the there was a story, and I think it was an aunt and her nephew. They had won the lottery, and they'd been playing the lottery together, and they were gonna, they said, if we win, we're gonna split it. And well, they won, and it was like a couple $1 million or something like that. Or no, it was like less than $1 million. It was like a couple 100,000 or something like that. And then the aunt was like, no, it's all mine. And it's like, we've been doing this all this time together, and it ended up splitting the family, and they ended up having to go to court and this and that. And it's just, when a lot of money comes into play, people change up.
It's like a take on that Mike Tyson.
It's the old adage.
Punch in the face.
Money is the root of all evil. Because
money is the root. It's the love of it is the root.
But let me tell you, when you see that money in your bank account, the greed comes in, unfortunately.
Jay, that reminded me, when I was a kid, I thought I was a millionaire because of the Monopoly game that McDonald's used to do.
Right. Because
when I would take the bus to school, one of the kids said that he had Boardwalk, and if anyone got Park Place, we would split the money and get $500,000 each. And of course, I got Park Place. I was like, great, we could split the money. But no, he actually had the same piece that I had. I mean, when you're a kid, you don't realize that they make one of the two pieces super common, so everyone can get it, but they make one very rare. So it's really a matter of getting that one rare piece to be a winner. I didn't know that, right? I thought that he just had half. I found the other half, but no, he had the same half that I had. But for like that day, I thought I was going to be a millionaire, or at least $500,000 heir.
Were you guys ready to throw away the relationship over it?
I didn't really know the dude that well. It was just a kid on the bus.
I just wanted to slip in something. So, I mean, because I'm a nerd and I watch all these documentaries. So how Monopoly even came about and how Parker Brothers went through this lawsuit, whatever. Monopoly was actually started through the Great Depression. And it was this woman who thought, it could encourage people that, to show poverty, you know what I mean? Especially in a metropolis in New York City. And of course, it was flipped by this guy, like in somewhere in the South. But I'm just saying, you see how greed always usurps good intentions, you know what I mean? And then the woman, tried to sue Parker Brothers. And of course, she, lost the lawsuit. But I think it was like a game that was set up in Coney Island.
Right.
So it's just funny that you mentioned that. Just really interesting.
It's based on Atlantic City, right? The street names are Atlantic City names.
Right. And the original intention was, as you mentioned, it was around then, it was to actually highlight the evils of the financial system, right, and to show how difficult it is for people to get ahead. But then, that message never really got across, because once it got out there, people were like, I guess whatever our nature is in this country took over and was like, I want to get as much as possible. And weren't taking in the message.
But what's even more atrocious is she was so happy that Parker Brothers approached her and said, yes, you were the one that pioneered the game. And she sold it to them for $500. And of course, we know the end of the story.
Yeah. Well, Jay, I think that it is successful in its own way of demonstrating the evils of the system, because it tends to break up families. People play Monopoly thinking it's all fun and games, and it gets very serious.
It's cutthroat. But it was supposed to the idea was to change society, to be able to like, okay, wow, this could be what happens out in the real world. Maybe we should second guess it. And no, it's not what it happens. But it's funny you brought that up, because when I was probably 5th grade or something like there. So I'm talking about 10, 11 years old. I made a board game with rules and pieces, and I put everything in a box. And this is where I learned more about the story of Monopoly, because it was actually rejected the first time by someone else. And so I put this whole thing together, and I put it in a box, and I mailed this package to the company that puts out Monopoly. And talking about, I got this game, I wanted this, whatever. And then so they actually sent me a message back saying, thank you, we don't take solicitations, blah, 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 blah. And so like, I think I even mentioned, or I remember being upset at the time, because thinking, I should write them back and tell them about, I know what happened with Monopoly, how you guys rejected it the first time. It was really crazy, but years later, I did see a game on the shelves that was oddly almost identical to mine. But whatever.
It usually tends to be the case. Inventors, which I admire.
That's why they've got that policy that we're not going to look at any ideas that you give us. We're going to bring it all back. Even if they're looking at it, that's their official stance.
Right.
Because even, let's say by coincidence, I'm not saying that was, maybe they did take your idea, but even if that were the case, they don't want to be sued years later as someone who had a similar idea.
Yeah, absolutely. But so, yeah, I think we got off topic a little bit, but I think it was sour grapes. I think, dude, take that $700, give it to him.
I agree. And from a legal perspective, I think that would be an implied contract. I think that that's the expectation that you have when you play that game. It's a slot machine. You're putting a quarter in. You're not getting your money back every time. It's not like every quarter you put in comes out. So this is an actual slot machine that's in use. Maybe it's an antique, but it's in operation. And I think there's an expectation there that unless there are other explicit agreements that you have, if you get the jackpot, you're going to win. Just like if you don't, you're going to lose.
Right. So what the guy should have done, the one whose home it was and whose machine it was, he should have went in and taken out the amount of money that he wanted to keep and leave in what he was comfortable with allowing people to play with.
Or he should put a sign up clearly on the machine, saying that if you win, you still lose.
Yeah, it's all mine regardless.
This is not a real game. Any money you put in there belongs to me.
Yeah, well, I mean, just hold on another 40 years, they'll get the 700 back,
Yeah, but listen, I think the appropriate thing here is not to try to take the money. If the guy is saying you can't have it, but you really want it, leave it there, and then you got to file a lawsuit. Because you can get into trouble if you try to strong arm that money and walk out with it, right?
Right.
Wow.
Wouldn't that be a little bit of a different scenario? Because you're not in a casino, you're in his home. Trying to walk out with
casino. It's funny. There are rules. Like, for example, if you're playing poker in a casino and you make a bet and you lose the bet, the casino can't even force you to put your chips in. They can kick you out and say you're banned from coming here, but they can't take your chips and say you bet them they belong to the house now.
I definitely don't know this legalese for sure.
But
I
think, even if that, I'm sure that's the case. But I think at the same time, maybe they can't force you, but then they also aren't under obligation to cash your chips in for cash, right?
Right. No, they can kick you out.
Yeah, and then you can just never get your money back anyway.
Right. So I'm saying that there are certain legal obligations and duties here, but it doesn't mean that someone can forcibly take the money from you either. You have to do it the proper way.
Well, they should have just done rock, paper, scissors and got it over with. See who gets to keep the money. Or play the hand of poker for it.
Okay. I'm sorry. Can you explain that?
Explain what?
I guess that's an American thing. I have no idea. So
rock, paper, scissors?
Rock.
It doesn't really make sense.
Okay, it's a it's not even just an American thing. It's very big in Japan. Matter of fact, they do it like for everything. So it's just a game. You have three things that you can display, right? So there's the rock, there's paper, and then there's scissors. And so if you hit rock beats scissors, because the idea is that rock crushes scissors, right? Scissors beats paper because it can cut it, and then paper beats rock because it can cover it.
That's where it falls apart, because rock would fly right through paper, but they had to have something that would beat the rock, and so they said it was paper.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's usually like 1, 2, 3, or you say rock, paper, scissors, shoot, and then whoever you're playing against does that, and then you can tell who wins that way. It's
like a variation of odds and evens. Have you ever played that? You put a 1 or a 2 out. It's like that, but now you have 3 options.
Yeah,
okay.
And it's pretty big in Japan. Like they do it for everything. It's crazy. I say that, I don't know if you're aware, I live in Japan, so that's why I'm bringing that up.
So play around. We'll try it out, guys.
All right, we'll try it. All right, let's do a quick one here. We'll do one time. So remember, this is rock, paper, scissor. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, shoot. Okay. So rock, paper, scissors, shoot. You got to put one up. See, I win. You lost.
Okay.
So she put the paper up. We couldn't see your scissors though. Okay, there it is. Okay. Yeah, well, that's how it goes. And then if you're Kami, you say 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
That's how it goes. All right. Well, Jay, you mentioned we got off topic. We really didn't, because we were talking about the financial system and we want to get into the bank collapse. So it is all related. But I think before we do that, I would like to talk about what Kami has been up to, because we were very impressed with her advocacy around the issue of autism and the Rockaway Beach Autistic Families. I know you have a walk coming up next month. So can you talk about your involvement? I think you're the founder of that group, right? How that all came to be?
Okay, so just short and sweet. Let me see. September of 2016, I approached Kevin, publisher of Kevin Boyle, the Rockaway Times, and you knew him when he was at the Wave. Very kind to me, to this day. I say it's Kevin's fault this whole thing unrolled out. So I approached him about a column about parenting a child on the autism spectrum. My daughter at the time was about 7. She was a bit younger, about 7. And she's nonverbal to this day. Now she is 14, will be 15 later on this year. But anyway, just started this column about parenting. And, it wasn't like these, morbid stories. I mean, it was very comical, just stories parents could remember, getting your child potty trained, chasing them, in the house to, eat it. It was just very comical. And I would use these things Toussaint Louverture, I would make myself sound like I'm this general, and people liked it, you know what I mean? Because I wanted to make it light. And then I started getting emails and said, you know what, maybe I should just do a support group. So at the time, I was hunting for places that would host us, because obviously I had no money to just, pay outright. And, at one time it was going to be the library, and then it got a little confusing because it was just too technical, and I'm just a very casual person. So anyway, I met this guy, William Francis. At the time, he opened this holistic cafe, Wilderness Yard. His name is William, by the way. So it was Wilderness. And he sold herbal teas and all this stuff. And so I just walked in and I said, listen, I just want to start a parent support group. Could we come here and I'll just give you some money every time we have a meeting? And December 8th, after much back and forth trying to suss this out, December 8th, 2016 was our first meeting.
So you've been doing this for 7 years now?
Yeah. Yeah. And to be honest, not to make myself sound very pious or out of my own pocket. Because every meeting I want to give people food. I wanted to make them feel welcome. And that's just the kind of person I am. But it worked. I grew friendships. I have friends to this day that we look to each other. Because one, I call her the OG. Her son's in his late 20s. Every individual, their parent, their child might be younger or older, but we all learn from each other. You know what I mean? So then after I met this guy, John Keyborn, he had, his daughter, he was a musician, and he was telling me about this Rock Out for Autism. So I'm like, that sounds kind of cool. Because again, at this point, I'm just doing monthly meetings. And then he said, you know what, well, see if you can get one of the concessions to Caracas. I got Rippers. I mean, we were doing Rock Out for Autism every summer on the boardwalk. And it was so fun because parents got to have fun, let loose, dance. I mean, Rockaway is a very classic rock community, but I've definitely tried to introduce various genres of music. So we had a band from Madagascar. They were so cool. Of course, reggae. I mean, a plethora of different, you know what I mean? And then boom, 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 kept growing. I met this lovely man at Knights of Columbus and just said, you know what? Why don't you do our meetings here? That was the eureka moment. Because, of course, it's central. There's parking. People know where it is. And then we just started hosting. This year was our 5th holiday party. Everyone goes home with a gift, including the adults. Just so beautiful because, I would go around the community, which is the part I don't like. Hi, I'm with Rockaway Beach Autism Families, and I'm doing a free raffle for the holiday. You know what I mean? And doing this constant speech, but people would give me gift certificates, whether it's Wit said, and Wit's been so kind. Wit even did a cooking class with the autistic children with us. So again, Rockaway is a very unique community because you never know whose door you're knocking in. They might be like, okay, big whoop. The people at RBQ, again, the NYPD did a training about, why it's important that if you see a person who might just look a little bit off the, you know what I mean, and you may assume they're on drugs or mentally disturbed, might be going through an autism, you know what I mean, like emotion, like stimming, like nervous. Why are you coming at me? So this is why this is a big thing that I'm really trying to grow with the NYPD and the FDNY. There's a fire in the house. You may not be able to get this autistic individual out. So my daughter is bigger than me, which is not to say much, and then you have much older individuals. So not everyone's going to be able to say, okay, get out the house now, let's go. Same thing with, FDNY sees an individual in a park and they may be acting out because they may be having like some sensory issues. So this is why this is like, I've been trying to like chip at so many blocks, but by God's grace, it will be done.
I think it's important. Talking especially with organizations like NYPD and FDNY, because making people aware of these issues so that there's not this miscommunication that could lead to other dangerous things. If a person's going through an autistic an episode or an emotional episode, so that they even at least think that that's a possibility before acting. So I think it's a good thing.
This is what happened with this. We did like a very casual meet and greet, and we came and spoke, and of course they spoke, and the the NYPD, they said that honestly, they're only trained with mental health issues. Right. Autism is not a mental health; it's developmental. You know what I mean? So how do you react to someone that may be 300 pounds, but going through a stimming thing, that they're flapping their hands and getting very nervous? And if you try to restrain them, they're going to knock you out. Because, again, when I tell people you've met one person with autism, you've met exactly one person with autism. Because that's another thing that I actually want to start bringing into the public square is it's so broad. It's so broad. You know what I mean? I think of my daughter who's nonverbal, but let me tell you, she skateboards, snowboards, and ice skates like nobody's business. But she can't do this. Right. Like mom constantly talking.
You mentioned that sometimes we refer to it as artistic, right? Because sometimes the sense of being an artist is actually heightened. Can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I first started the column, I called it Life with Our Autistic Child. So meanwhile, people are reading it and they're thinking it's all about art, right? But then I was saying, like, maybe I should have said autistic, but I just didn't want that label. You know what I mean? And then when I started the group in the beginning, it was called Rockaway Beach Autistic Family Support Group. So I was getting emails like, do you guys do art? Like, you know what I mean? So then I just had to really be, transparent that, I use the word artistic to embody all the beautiful characteristics and personalities and nuances the autism community, embodies. You know what I mean? Now, I'm not saying like being described as autistic is limiting or reducing from who you are, but I just felt autistic just really encapsulates, because again, we're autistic. All three of us here are artistic in different respects. You know what I mean? And I feel like the autistic community, it's the same for them, just being different way of talking, different way of reacting to stuff, different way of embracing things. You know what I mean? So whether, still
Right.
evolving, but
with the world, we actually have someone in the chat who would like to link up with you. He says that he's the parent of an autistic child as well.
And I put your Instagram, both the organization, Rockaway Beach Autism Families, and your personal Instagram in the chat. So,
oh, that's lovely. And again, this is what this is about, because the more people I meet, the more that selfishly I learn, but the more I also get to share and build. Like right now, my focus, I hate to say my focus because it's our focus. Because we just established our board and all that stuff. Employment, trying to get these individuals in jobs. And, spoiler alert, by October of this year, we'll be running our own company. So again, no reason why it can't happen with the proper, I hate to say proper, but the supportive scaffolding established. Could be a beautiful thing. Put Rockaway on the map. Rockaway Beach Autism Families in Rockaway Beach, New York, has a company run by autistic individuals. You know what I mean? And it could happen. And this is why, thank you so much for allowing me to even, be on your platform, because the more we share is the more we can make a difference, little by little. Again, 2016, now we're in 2023. You know what I mean? I kind of just again, I'm a big superhero fan. So I feel like we are the team of Avengers. You know what I mean? So
yes, you got
don't
the
ask me
right?
what character I like. X-Men, Avenger.
You brought it up. You gotta say now, Rogue. You gotta say which one.
So,
this is not important, but at the same time, like I just look at our little community as we are like superheroes that we're actually going to really shock and make a huge add to the value of what living in Rockaway is about. So,
right. I think it's pretty amazing that we've been doing this show, Jay, for over a year now. And almost every week we've been able to bring on someone different from the community who's been doing something great. I mean, there really are a lot of local heroes around here who need to be celebrated. I'm really glad that we're able to give them a little bit of a platform here. Now, Kami, I wanted to ask you about the walk that you've got scheduled.
Oh gosh. Okay. Thank you. So this took a little bit of, planning. Again, I've been thinking about this like 5 years ago, but finally, so it is April 23rd on the boardwalk. Everyone goes home with if you finish the walk, well, this is not the exact plan, but everyone goes home with a gift. I'll have t-shirts on sale. So the walk is going to be from 126th Street to 96th Street. And then the after party, like I like to call it, right up at RBQ, live music, popular bands, people know, t-shirts for sale. And again, first ever walk for autism in Rockaway. And why not on the boardwalk? I mean, Rockaway is so blessed. We have a boardwalk. We are like between the ocean and the bay. And again, to do this in April, which is Autism Awareness Month. So anyone listening, any of your, fans, please, April 23rd, look us up, Rockaway Beach Autism Families on Facebook or Instagram. First ever walk for autism in Rockaway. And guys, the dream, can you imagine? 100 people on the boardwalk walking for autism.
Yes, that would be amazing. I think we could make
Pretty cool. Pretty cool.
It sounds like a great plan. And then, so you said this is going to be April 23rd. I'm looking at it right now, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Correct. Sunday, April 23rd.
Can we get that on the screen, Jay?
I've put it in the chat. The link to the organization page. Trying to find the graphic now, but
if you went on the my Instagram, you'll see it. You'll see it. Yeah, or Rockaway Beach Autism Families Instagram. I do need to improve my social media savvy with that, but yeah. Well, that's the website. So
on the website, and there's a prompt to sign up for the walk here.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be April 23rd from 11 to 2.
So you got the prompt to sign up. Is this to sign up to help, or is this to sign up to participate? What are you asking for people
just to walk? I don't want anything. I just want them to walk, show up. Let us have 100 people. I don't care. You could be in Rockaway, you could be in Long Island, Brooklyn, flying in from, I don't know, Mars. Let us show 100 people, and you guys included, because I want to keep you accountable, to showing the love for the autism community in Rockaway. And again, you meet one person with autism, you've met one person with autism.
Now, I can't commit to being there. I know. And at the time, however, you could potentially FaceTime me, and I could virtually be there.
That'd be your responsibility, Mr. Scala. So
maybe I'll walk and I'll hold my phone up with Jay on the phone, and we're walking together.
Yeah, right. Now this looks like a great event. And I saw it on Instagram, and I thought, yeah, this was something that'd be good to highlight. And to hear more about. So, and you said you do these meetings monthly?
Yeah, so we do it every third Thursday of the month, Knights of Columbus, 333 Beach, 90th Street, Rockaway Beach, New York. The meetings commence at 7 p.m. and at 9 p.m. Every meeting, I have a speaker speaking on a plethora of subjects. For example, trust, having a guardian in terms of you pass away. I mean, Mike, of course, is a lawyer, you would understand that. Setting up your child in case anything happens to you. I mean, there's so many ingredients that goes into raising a special needs child that having all your bases covered is really important. And then also we had the local karate place, World Champions Karate. The sensei came and did a demonstration, and now we have loads of our children going over there to do karate. We had the O'Malley Irish Dance Academy. So, I mean, every month I try to change it up, that it could be a bit serious, but then it could be fun. So, for example, the Rockaway Beach Dance Company. Again, we even had a cooking class or an appreciation of Ukraine with what's currently going there. We did a whole month dedicating autism awareness to Ukraine. So we had a local autistic boy who is a fantastic artist. I actually have his work on my wall up here. He led them into sketching Ukraine's national flower, Ukraine's national bird, by the way, which is a nightingale. I have to learn that. So, and even their flag. And then we actually had, a planting class where we planted sunflower seeds, which is Ukraine's national flower. And they posted photos when they were sprouting. So, I mean, again, just do a plethora of events. We did a fundraiser with the Global Autism Project, because again, in my head, looking at what's going on over there, I was thinking, what is going on with the autistic community? So right away, there's a local who went there to volunteer. We were actually able to fundraise to support, her trip over there. And also even with Kentucky, Western Kentucky had those horrific tornadoes. So we did a fundraiser for them just to support a family who were displaced from their home. And again, living in Rockaway, we know what Sandy's like. And of course, you know, Howard Beach and other areas. So, I mean, again, it's not just about, it's really, again, I just feel like it's just this bubble, you know what I mean? And however we can help and then get help in turn, you know what I mean? So, because again, in this world, you know, because people would say, okay, Kami, well, you're spending all this money, and my family would be like, okay, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? You know why? It always comes back. It always comes back. I may not get it in my pocket, but I may get it in a different way that benefits these children. So that's just the kind of person I am, you know, and I'm not trying to sound like Mother Teresa or Gandhi, but it really does. It really does. So, and, you know, God knows. He knows. Of course, I'm a big person of faith about that.
Yeah, and I think you absolutely should be applauded for your efforts. And, you know, every once in a while, it certainly is encouraging. Not that we do it for the credit, but to receive some kind of recognition.
Oh, man, but listen, the amount of people that support. So for me to just say like, okay, you know, thank you, would be wrong, absolutely wrong. Because there's so many people. John Maroney of RBQ, let me tell you, this guy, if I say I'm doing an event tomorrow, he comes out. The people at the nights, Rockaway Wish, I'm telling you, this community is amazing. And what I really love, and I've been asked this question so long, is, you know, they talk about the west end of Rockaway, the east end of Rockaway. And I said, listen, come to Midtown. That's just my way of solving it. But I mean, I'm being funny, but at the same time, relationships can be made, right, even if we come from different I mean, look at me, you're talking to me and I have a very different background, socioeconomic, cultural, accent, everything. But I think once people realize we all to, you know, and I know this sounds very pious, and I keep using this word, but I guess I'm just very optimistic. If you give people a chance, they won't disappoint you. If you
right, well, you can also find common ground. So you might have people who otherwise wouldn't have even associated with each other or thought to do so. Precisely. But they can come together behind an issue that unites them. Like, for example, if they have someone with autism in their family, they can get together on that issue. I mean, in Rockaway, you do see that amongst really a host of different issues. We're united by lack of good healthcare options, by lack of transportation, by lack of infrastructure, by a lot of different things. And so I think it's a matter of finding that common ground. And we're stronger together, you know, and you're right. There is often too much division that you see, but we really get more done and we achieve more when we're able to put our differences aside and really celebrate our differences and work together.
Now, Kami, there's a question in the chat. When is your next, when's the next meeting? Now, is that the 28th?
Yes, the 3rd. Oh, you're good.
Sorry, no, I'm sorry. The 3rd, the 30th, the 30th.
No. So, you know what? I feel bad now. You're probably right. No, the next meeting is, Thursday, the 23rd.
23rd, day before my birthday.
You serious? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm April. When are you?
So Thursday the 23rd is your next meeting. It sounds really great. You know,
7 p.m. at Knights of Columbus, 333 Beach 90th. If you're local in the Queens or, you know, Brooklyn or whatever.
Okay, sounds good. Now you did mention one thing, and I just want to kind of ask you. You said it's the 3rd Thursday of every month. What do you do? What do you do on Thanksgiving? Isn't that the 3rd Thursday of every month? Not every month of November.
And turkeys.
We do have exceptions.
But this is actually the 4th Thursday because March 2nd was a Thursday.
Right. So actually the 3rd Thursday would be the 16th. That would be in 2 days.
You see, this is what happens when you come on a lawyer show.
Listen, I'm trying.
Okay, so
Oh, you have a point. You have a point. Because people do contact me and say, is the meeting tomorrow? And I'm like, well, actually.
okay, so let's be clear so we don't have any confusion. It's the 23rd.
Correct, of March. The next meeting, which is before, well, no, because then we have a meeting in April, but the very next meeting for the month of March is the 23rd, 7 p.m. at Knights of Columbus.
All right, that sounds
So
really
check
good.
this out on something that you had just mentioned. I have been working on a song with some people who have been involved politically in the Rockaways. And one of the lines in the song is, "You can catch me up and down the beach like I'm the 22. Wasn't me. Someone else on the song said that. But when you said that it's about working together from East and West and Midtown, that came to my head. Catch me up and down the beach like I'm the 22, Q22.
That's what I feel like. So I definitely go all parts, just talking to people, and you know what I mean? And again, I mean, I've been blessed, but at the same time, what would you have in common with me? Probably nothing, you know what I mean? But like you just said, just parenting a child or knowing someone or just caring. Because like I even tell people, it's not just for parents or caregivers or, you know, general public. I mean, I actually give out autism awareness cards that, for example, it's like a business card. So like if you see a child in the supermarket or an adult and they may be acting up, may throw themselves on the ground, throw a tantrum, maybe a little bit not too cooperative, I give them a card and say, you know what, my child has autism. And it just lists the basic traits of autism. So this is open to everyone because it's a teaching moment. Because honestly, when I was first told that my daughter could be autistic, I said, what is that? How dare you? And then I said, how dare you? I didn't even know what they were talking about. So let me tell you, this thing rolls up on you, especially me who was completely ignorant. But then you just realize, even on the bus, you might be commuting on the way to work or school or whatever. A little situation happens. These cards help because this could change a very, volatile moment and decompress it. Then people just realize, you know what, person has autism. And then we just learn from each other.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Let me ask you something. This is, I guess, a topic that has been controversial, but I've seen debate as to whether the proper terminology is a person with autism or an autistic person. I've seen you kind of put the adjective first. Is that the way you prefer? Or does it not matter to you?
Let me tell you, I've gone through that song and dance because a few people called me out on it, even autistic individuals. So again, don't use me as the end all to be all. From what I've been told from autistic individuals, they rather the adjective autistic. There's even a hashtag autistics. Like they just want to be known that I'm autistic. It's not something that has to be like, I guess, packaged.
Right.
Now you do have some people who tend to just say with autism.
Right.
With autism spectrum disorder or on the spectrum. To be honest, there's no proper way. Yeah. I think a case by case basis.
Because I think for some, they want to be thought of as a person first. So it's a person who just happens to have autism. But then some people don't want to be defined. They think like, okay, if I'm an autistic person, that's putting the word autistic before person. But then some people think they would prefer that because if it's person with autism, it's almost like saying, you're a person with blackness or something like that. Like it's not a bad thing to be there.
Right. I mean, there was a conversation that I had with a young woman, very talented. She's actually an artist. And, I guess she reads my column. Again, this is all the way in Washington State. So the power of social media. Well, you would know that. You're in Japan. But, and she said, I love reading your columns, but I don't know why you say with autism. Why don't you just say autistic? So I said, well, it depends. Again, Mike, I wish I could answer that question. I try to be as sensitive as I can, but very often, even with something like ABA, there's so many things that raise people's eyebrows and get them very emotional. And I mean, I can tell you countless situations where I'm like bawling my eyes out because I'm like, that was not my intention. But you never know how a simple word or expression could really tick somebody off. You know?
And I think we've seen that a lot in the modern day, right? Where things, and I know people make, light of it kind of in the public discourse about being triggered so much. But we do see a lot of that on a variety of issues, and where it makes it kind of difficult to talk about certain things, to get to nuances of different things, for fear of you're going to upset someone or trigger someone in a way, and you can just miss the point, and you can miss the intent of the person, or miss out on an interaction, focusing on something that's it can get in the way of a larger interaction.
Yeah, and I mean, I would just say, even with me, I mean, like culturally, I've been referred to by many adjectives. But I just, I would say to myself, I just say, you know what, like, think of the context and think of where the perspective this person is coming from. Because if I really was to get offended at what anybody said about me in terms of the way I speak, the way I look, the way like whatever, I want to leave my house. So I just say, you know what, give them the power of the doubt that they really didn't truly mean to be offensive, but it's just a matter of language and interpretation.
Yeah, I think in many ways, we should often, especially these days, take that extra step in the beginning to, like you said, give them the benefit of the doubt before we find out, and then find that teachable moment, and then see which way they change from there. And I've seen that for example, with language. I've seen that in Japan, where, hip hop is a global community, right? And there's a lot of people who use, especially hip hop, Black artists use the N-word a lot. And I've been confronted in Japan with Japanese artists who'll come up and be like, yo, what's up? And then, dropping the N-word. Now, if it's the United States, I understand that the person understands the context behind that, where it comes from, why it's a word that we don't use, why it's a problematic word. But someone in Japan, their only exposure might have been the music, and so they don't get it. So my first instinct is to, instead of just being like, all right, it's go time, it's, listen, this is a problem because, and then now we've given them the benefit of the doubt. And then if after that they go the same route again, now it's something, now we have an issue, now there's a problem. But take that first step to be like, okay, they might not have the context, there might be a benefit of the doubt here that we should give them, that type of thing. And I think should be the same in a lot of these different spaces.
Yep. I live it every day. So,
And it takes courage to do what you do.
You just, you appreciate the journey, to be quite honest, because, it's a learning. It's just, we all learning at the end of the day, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah, no, and anytime we put ourselves out there for a cause or whatever it is, we're stepping into that arena, and you're going to deal with all kinds of people, all kinds of agendas. Oftentimes it is innocent, like you said, sometimes it's not, but you kind of take it all as it comes, and
precisely
it's part of the territory.
Absolutely. But it sounds like you're doing good work, and even just gauging from the interest in the chat, we even found someone in the chat that's interested in coming out and connected to what you're doing. So I think that's a beautiful thing, and I love to hear about your experience in the community and how you've been embraced, and the group's been embraced.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Thank you, Mike, for totally unexpected, but again, things come.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I'm glad we're able to help, and whatever we can do going forward, let us know. I did want to, with the time we had remaining, look at the polls. Now, Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get last week's poll up on Reddit because of what seems to be a technical issue. At first, I thought I was banned or something, but it wasn't letting me put the post up. But it seems like I can't get into any subreddit right now with the account. So I don't know what's going on with that. So we may have to ask this same question again over the next week, which was, do you believe the separation of church and state is important in government? Because the mayor had recently signaled that it wasn't so much of a priority to him. So we want to get people's thoughts on that. We do have another question that we want to pose based on the recent events, right, Jay?
Right. So, I mean, I'm sure everyone's aware about what's been going on the last couple of days with the financial collapse. We've got two banks, actually one in New York, Signature Bank, it's just collapsed. And so there's a lot of talk about, is it going to be another 2008 all over again, and what's happening? And the question is it going to be a bailout? Right now, we've seen, Biden's come out and some other people come out and said, look, listen, taxpayers are not bailing out. First, they're not bailing out the investors, and they're not going to be bailing out the people in the banks. That after the 2008 collapse, the Obama-Biden administration had put together this regulation that made all banks pay into this fund for just so happens this type of event. And so the money that's supposed to make these depositors whole is going to come out of that fund, which is good news because I don't know if people want the taxpayers to bail out these banks. However, when something like this happens, that can cause a run on other banks. If people feel, okay, well, this bank collapsed, this other bank collapsed, is my money safe? They're going to go run and want to pull their money out. And the way banks operate, if everybody that had an account at that bank pulled their money out, the bank would just implode. And so that happens, it becomes a domino effect. So if more banks start to collapse, then it might get to a point where the government's actually looking at this idea of taxpayers bailing out the banks. So that was the question that I wanted to pose is, should the taxpayers bail out these failing banks?
Right. And that's the whole concept of too big to fail. And right. I think that if you pose that question as is, most people are going to gravitate towards no, but there's some context there that may be missing. I mean, it could depend on the circumstance. If you were to ask them, if it came to a situation where our entire financial system would collapse if we didn't do it, then how would you feel? You might get some different answers. I think ideally, most people are going to say no.
Right, and that's kind of what happened in 2008, right, where they went and bailed out like the auto industry and all of that, because this would have been this massive catastrophic failure for the whole economy. And even in these banks, you've got the investors in the banks who know investing is risky and whatnot, but you've got the people who have their money in there. You've got FDIC insurance, which only goes up to $250,000, the government guarantees, but above that, they don't. And usually the accounts above that would be like small business who have to make payroll and this and that. So if the government didn't step in, then those workers would not get their paychecks, and that could be an issue. But again, the question becomes, is that the government's, the taxpayers' responsibility to pay for that?
I think there's also a question as to whether the system we have is sustainable.
Right.
We're repeatedly finding ourselves in this same situation. It happened in 2008 and people were not happy about it, but I think we kind of gritted our teeth and said, okay, let's hope it doesn't happen again. But if it's going to keep happening, I think we have to start asking ourselves, do we need to be doing something different to avoid finding ourselves in this situation?
Well, that's the crux of it. You know what I mean? Like it's, a chicken before the egg. You know what I mean? Like what could be done? No, I'm not saying it could be completely avoided or, this could never happen again if ABCD was done. But obviously certain infrastructures are in place now are obviously contributing to these possibilities. And we have to ask ourselves, what policies, coming from the Federal Reserve, coming from so many things, even with we're not going to get into so many, because this is a different opinion I have. But at the same time, obviously an infrastructure has to be set in place that could not avoid, because we can't, totally prevent certain things from happening.
Mitigate.
But if you could mitigate it, that it's not automatically, this is the reality now. Because think of what 2008, the economy was coming from then, and think of what 2023, 2022, arguably, what the economy was, spiraling off from then. Now, could everything be mitigated perfectly? No. But obviously something is not being done.
Right. So you're acknowledging that there are factors beyond our control, like the pandemic, for example.
Right. Absolutely.
That was going on in 2008, 2007. There was no pandemic.
There wasn't a pandemic, right, but that was the collapse.
It was a bubble that bust.
Yeah.
It was a bubble. It was also, people getting a little, I'm sorry.
That was really putting 2 wars on the credit card. Let's not forget that.
I'm sorry. Oh yes, that it was that too. And we can't ignore just people behind the scenes not doing what they're supposed to do, trying to be sly and take advantage of systems. Now, one of the things is after what happened in 2008, the Obama-Biden administration sought to put some regulations into place, and that's kind of what set this fund up. But when the Trump administration came in, he rolled back some of these regulations, just like we saw with the transportation, when we saw the recent train crash, and some of those regulations were rolled back by the previous administration. So some of the stuff that would have sought to prevent this was pulled back a little bit.
Jeremy in the chat asks, did Trump deregulation make the banks collapse?
I don't know if it made, but it didn't. I don't know if we could say it specifically made it, but I think he pulled back some of the regulations that were put in place to try to deter something like this from happening.
Lixa in the chat says, I think banks need an oversight committee that will not allow our money in the bank to be gambled the way SVB did. SVB also only had one person on the board who actually had banking experience.
Right. And this is the thing, is the way that our world is interconnected. I read that even some of the banks in Japan are going to feel the effects of what has happened with SVP and Signature.
Of course.
So in that context, does the government have a responsibility to bail out?
And then you also have to ask now, what is the fallout going to be in terms of people not trusting that their money is safe in banks? And is it going to lead to a reduction in deposits? And it's going to have a negative impact on our economy. People aren't using the banking system as much anymore.
Right. The whole banking system, relies on trust in the banks, right?
Faith. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And the way they make their money is they basically put money out that they don't physically have. Because if everyone pulled out all their money, the bank just does not have all the money that they, extend themselves with. So.
Right. But they're making investments that are supposed to spur our economic activity. Right? We're very reliant on that activity happening.
Right. You're right. So you put in your money in the bank loans that money out at an interest rate, with kind of the expectation that you're not going to come in here and pull it all out, or everyone's not going to pull it all out. And they make money off of that, which helps to fuel the bank and, bring about money for loans and this sort of stuff. So it is kind of a fragile system. But, I don't think we should be making a run on it. I know people are nervous right now. Stocks crashed, but we're back up today. And I don't have $250,000 in the bank anyway, so I'm under FDIC insurance on any of my banks. So,
well, yeah, that's the thing. Also, I guess we have to see how this plays out. We live in the world of the 24/7 news cycle where this is going on now, and it's on the top of everyone's mind. But next week, will we even be discussing it? Will it end up being the calamity that it was in 2008? Maybe not.
Good point. It's a good point.
Right. Absolutely. And maybe the steps that they did when they stepped in right away and took control of these things, immediately, maybe that will mitigate any sort of ripple effects, and hopefully it doesn't spread to other banks. And so.
Right. You kind of look at it like a virus spreading, right? Like we had the pandemic, the virus is spreading out of control. We're hoping that this one can be contained before it spreads everywhere.
Right. And the thing that would actually trigger this to spread out is if people made a run on the banks. If everyone was like, okay, look, I'm nervous. I'm going to go get all my money out. And if enough people did that, then that's what's going to trigger these banks to start failing. If people like kind of chill and let things play a little bit, then everything should be okay. But what do you think?
In the chat that banks get richer, filthy beasts.
What do you think, Kami? Do you think the taxpayers should bail out these banks?
No.
Or should they be allowed to fail? And it's just the cost of business and capitalism.
Now that's like a very that's an end all to be all.
If you screwed up your personal bank, would the taxpayers be bailing you out? Would the government come in and get you?
That's a great question. Also, just to throw this out there, we bailed out the banks, but now when we're talking about bailing out the students, people are having a heart attack over it. I mean, if we can give money to the banks, why can't we give some relief to the students who took out these loans when they were 17 years old and didn't really know what they were doing?
What about those students who paid off their loans?
Well, what about them? Does that mean?
So they shouldn't be compensated?
Well, I mean, if you're bombing the country, do you say, what about the people who are already hit with the bombs? I mean, don't you just want to stop the bombing?
I think you asking what about people who's already paid off their loans? If you're going to forgive someone else,
let's not jump topics. I mean, I went to school. I mean, I hate to boast, full school, but I did have to pay, loans for my grad school. Yeah, let's not go.
See, we have covered this. We talked about this previously.
Yeah,
I've paid my loans off. I don't have any student debt, but I don't have a problem with there being some student loan forgiveness, even though I paid it back. But I do understand the question of, okay, well, if you're going to forgive debt for others, do the people who have paid off their loans, do they get like a rebate check, so to speak?
Well, what about honoring the terms of the original loan, which was supposed to be at the time, if you did public service, for example, you can get forgiveness after a certain number of times.
Right.
The Trump administration just outright refused to acknowledge that, even though that was part of the condition. I mean, I, for example, took out loans for law school based on that premise. So to be told that now, later on, we're no longer going to honor that, I don't think that that's right.
Right. That is.
Do you think $10,000?
Say it again.
I mean, for example, I mean, I can tell you about my grad loans. I mean, some of them go up until $250,000. $10,000 is like a drop in the bucket.
Right.
No, yeah. Right. But they were supposed to forgive your entire debt.
Right. For certain individuals, there was that.
Well, that was if you worked for
if you did 10 years of public service. Right.
Right. If you did public service, which actually still stands.
Except the Trump administration denied like 99% of their applications.
Right. So that actually they broke a contract, so to speak. So what we're seeing is there's a lot of different situations and scenarios where people can fall in different categories, right? You had a full ride. I've paid off all of mine. Mike was told he was going to get after service. So like we've got 3 different scenarios here where it's like again we see nuance in the conversation. But as far as the banks, what do you think? Do they need
banks? That's a tough question because I mean, when it's people's money that the Silicon Valley Bank, and then of course the one in New York. Someone told me something like, "Well, I'm with HSBC, or if I'm Chase, I'm safe." I might not be safe.
No, didn't HSBC about like 10, 15 years ago?
And my whole family being English, we all HSBC. But I said to my aunt, I said, don't think your money's safe either. You know what I mean? But I don't know. It's a tough thing because I think it would be wrong to put the burden on taxpayers. But if if the question was burden on you or complete collapse, what do you do?
Right.
That's a tough.
Because you have to think, okay, the taxpayer doesn't want to have to pay for it. But if you get to a point where not paying for it actually hurts the taxpayer more. That's a real conundrum, right? Maybe morally you might not want to do it, but it might actually be more practical for you to do it at that point if it's going to cause more pain as a taxpayer to have an entire system collapse on you.
Right.
I think
It's a difficult, a decision to make there. I think if it comes to that point, and that, it might have to be done, but I wouldn't want the bank itself to be able to continue to operate. If you're going to make the people whole and make them where they can take their money, go somewhere else, but don't reward the bank by allowing them to stay in business.
Okay, well, think of what happened with the Great Depression. All these financial institutions fell under. You know what I mean? And the country went through a major collapse. People were, committing suicide. Even in the 80s, you know what I mean? With the recession in the 80s, people were throwing themselves out the window. But I mean, who should be accountable? And especially, let's think about the debt right now in the United States. I don't even think this government could swallow that, even if they, you know what I mean? So this is a tough question. And I don't think the best economists in the world would not even have the wisest answer, because at the end of the day, somebody will suffer.
This is true.
Reminds me, gosh, forgive me. It's a Bangladesh comedian. He's from Toronto. Somebody gonna hurt real bad. I don't know if you remember.
Russell Peters.
Yes, somebody gonna hurt real bad. And that's basically it.
We're headed. I mean, with our debt, it keeps growing, keeps going out of control. Every administration comes through and adds to it. One, some way more than others, but it still keeps growing, and there's no signs of bringing it back. And there is going to be, there's going to be the piper to pay at some point. It's going to happen.
So, Jay, why don't you put the poll question out this week?
I thought I said it earlier.
No, but we've got to make it presentable for the show.
Oh, okay. Okay. Let's see. Okay, let's add a little bit more context to it instead of just simply should taxpayers bail out the banks, right? Because like you said, there might be, there's something else you need to think about there, right? So, okay, let's just try this. The poll question of the week. If it comes to a possible, I need a yes or no, right, for the poll question?
You're
okay.
on the right track.
Let me do yours. Let me do yours. Huh?
You were on the right track. You're still going to ask if they should be bailed out if that was met, right?
Okay.
You can say something like if it's on the brink of financial collapse or something.
Right. Yeah. So the poll question of the week is, if we're looking at a possible system-wide collapse, should the government use taxpayer money to bail out the banks? How about that?
Fair question.
All right.
Wow.
Adds a little bit more to think about in there.
Yeah.
Jeremy, we got a couple people in the chat. Stop bankers bonus pay. How do you fail and get a bonus? That's an issue. James, I thought Clinton got the debt down to zero. I think that's a lot of people hear that, but it wasn't the debt was down to zero.
Wasn't it balancing the budget?
It was balancing the budget. And so
a deficit. But
I think the deficit was zero, but that's just what they're paying out versus what they're taking in.
Right.
And he was able to balance it. But I think there was a little bit of a misnomer there, because some of that, to balance that, he was borrowing money from Social Security. And it wasn't good, and that was, a lot of presidents do it. That's why people talk about Social Security is in trouble. It's because the government looks at this big pile of money that we all pay into, and they're like, well, we need some money for budget. Well, let's go ahead and use some of that. These people aren't going to retire for another 80 years. We'll just pay it back. And they never do.
Right. And technically, that isn't the person's money who paid it, even though the system is set up so that they're supposed to be getting back at the end. It isn't like you're putting into an account and that money automatically comes back to you. You're just paying now for the people who are getting it now, hoping that people will pay for you later.
Right. So I think the government shouldn't be able to touch that money at all. But, it's just another topic.
So, yeah, very big questions and conversations we've had this week. And I appreciate, Kami, you for coming on. We'd like to
thank you.
give our guest the last word. We call it the bottom line. And it could be anything on your mind that you want to leave our viewers and listeners with about what we talked about, or even beyond that. So whatever comes to mind, Kami, what is the bottom line?
Oh dear, I wasn't prepared for this one.
You want to play
No. Just be like, so even parenting a child on the spectrum, I read something somebody sent me. It's not a death sentence. It's challenging. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of discovery. And just like what this country is going through now, it's the same thing. It's a lot of discovery, a lot of learning together. And hopefully this actually unites us, regardless of whatever, party affiliation or culture or politics. Because at the end of the day, it's about our survival. You know what I mean? So I just feel like, just like parenting my daughter on the spectrum, meeting other families, still learning as a country, and me being an immigrant here, immigrant, still learning and doing things through the routes of how knowledge could be attained. You know what I mean? So, and I think this is the problem, that everyone's so stuck into what they think is correct. It's nothing correct. It's just a learning process. And by God's grace, we'll make it to the other side.
Wow, very well said. And you tied the themes that we covered all together very nicely there.
Yeah, those journalism skills coming into play.
That's right. Don't forget to check out Kami's articles in the Rockaway Times as well. Great local reporter. But Jay, as always, where can people find us every week?
They can find us on YouTube. Look up Nuance Show. You get the replays of all of these episodes, and you can go there, comment, take part in the conversation. You can also check us out on Instagram. And if you do podcasts, anywhere podcasts are available, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, the audio goes on there as well. So join us, subscribe, sign up, comment, and all of that.
Excellent. And don't forget, on Thursday, March 16th, that is this Thursday, we will be holding the Queens Link Town Hall in Ozone Park. I will be emceeing the event, and it will be from 6:30 to 9 p.m. at MS 137. That's 109-15 98th Street. So if you can, please come by and join us for a discussion about what the future of transit might look like in Ozone Park, especially as it relates to the abandoned Rockaway Beach line.
And in the following Thursday, on the 23rd.
Oh! Rockaway Beach Autism Families, our support group meeting happens monthly, every approximately third Thursday of the month, night of Columbus, 333 Beach 90th. It's free, and I always have loads of refreshments for everyone.
You can't go wrong with that. There'll be food. By the way, you can do that.
Yeah.
This Thursday, we'll have refreshments. Next Thursday as well. So come to all these meetings, and you also get some free food.
Yep. And on April 23rd, there's the first ever Autism Walk in the Rockaways,
Yes.
right?
Yep, on the boardwalk. Yep.
Rockaway Beach Autismfamilies.org.
Yes.
There you go. Excellent.
Oh, and cha. So Rockaway Beach Autism Families, feel free to join our private Facebook page on Facebook, Rockaway Beach Autism Families, and then Instagram, anyone could just sign up. So
Great. Well, we thank you, Kami. We thank you,
thank you
for checking us out in the chat, and maybe on the replay or on the podcast, wherever you're getting this. As always, we've got work to do. We will catch you next week.